Elliot's world shattered in a single sentence. Spoken in the sterile break room of Harper and Sons Construction. You're fired. Effective immediately. 10 years of sweat, calloused hands, and loyalty to the company dissolved because of a whispered truth was gay. At 34, he stood frozen, the foreman's words echoing like a gunshot in his chest. He'd always been careful, keeping his personal life locked away in the small town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, where pickup trucks and church steeples define the skyline. But secrets have a way of slipping out. A co-worker had seen him with Sam, his partner of 2 years, at a diner 20 miles away, their hands brushing briefly over a shared milkshake. That fleeting moment, born of love, had cost him everything. Elliot stumbled out of the office, his work boots heavy on the gravel lot. The late autumn air bit at his knuckles as he clutched his toolbox. His only companion now. He didn't cry, not yet. Crying would mean admitting defeat, and Elliot had fought too hard to let this town break him. He drove his battered Ford pickup to the only place that felt safe, Rosie's Diner, where Sam worked the evening shift. The diner was a relic of the 1950s, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Sam, 29, was behind the counter, his black hair catching the glow of the neon sign that flickered open. His warm brown eyes met Elliot's, and in that glance, Elliot felt the weight of his shame lighten, if only for a moment. They fired me, Elliot said, his voice low, as he slid into a booth. Sam's face fell, but he didn't speak. He just poured a coffee, slid it across the table, and sat down across from him. They can't do that, Sam said, his voice steady but laced with anger. It's 2025. There are laws. Laws don't mean much in Willow Creek. Elliot cut in, staring into the black coffee. They said it was unrelated, but I heard the whispers. They know about us. Sam reached for his hand, but Elliot pulled back, glancing at the other patrons, an elderly couple and a trucker nursing a burger. Not here, he muttered. Sam's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They'd learned to be careful, to hide their love behind closed doors. But hiding hadn't been enough. The diner's door chimed, and Mrs. Clara, the receptionist from Harper and Sons, walked in. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pinned neatly and a kind but guarded smile. She'd worked at the company longer than Elliot, typing invoices and answering phones with a quiet efficiency. She carried a small wooden box, no bigger than a book, and set it on the table before Elliot. I heard what happened, she said softly, her eyes meeting his. This is for you. Open it when you're ready. She didn't wait for a response, just turned and left, her heels clicking on the linoleum. Elliot stared at the box, its surface worn but polished, engraved with faint initials he couldn't quite read. What's this supposed to be? He asked Sam, who shrugged, equally puzzled. Curiosity tugged at him, but so did fear. He pushed the box aside, not ready to face whatever it held. That night, Elliot lay awake in the small apartment he shared with Sam, the box sitting untouched on the kitchen table. He thought of his decade at Harper and Sons' 10 years of hauling lumber, climbing scaffolds, and earning respect he thought was unshakable. He'd started as a kid, barely 24, eager to prove himself in a town that valued hard work above all. He'd risen to crew leader, trusted to oversee million-dollar projects. But none of that mattered when the truth about who he loved came to light. Sam stirred beside him, his voice soft in the dark. You're more than that, job. Elle. We'll figure this out. But Elliot wasn't so sure. Willow Creek wasn't kind to men like them, and the weight of starting over felt like a mountain he couldn't climb. The next morning, Elliot returned to the diner, the box still unopened in his truck. He couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Clara's face, her quiet determination. The way she'd handed him the box like it was a lifeline. He ordered a coffee, more out of habit than want, and watched Sam move through the morning rush with his usual grace. A few locals cast sideways glances, their whispers barely audible but sharp enough to cut. Elliot's hands tightened around his mug. He drove to the library, a squat brick building with outdated computers and a faint musty smell. He needed answers about the firing, about his rights, about what to do next. The librarian, a young woman named Mia, helped him navigate legal websites. "You might have a case," she said, pointing to a page about workplace discrimination. "Pennsylvania has protections, but small companies like Harper's can skirt them if they're clever." Elliot's jaw clenched. He wasn't a lawyer. He didn't have the money for one, either. But Mia's words sparked a flicker of fight he hadn't felt since yesterday. He thanked her and drove home, the box still sitting in his passenger seat, its mystery nagging at him. That evening, Sam convinced him to open it. They sat at their kitchen table, a single bulb casting shadows across the room. The box creaked as Elliot lifted the lid. Inside was a folded letter, a stack of Polaroids, and a small key. The letter was in Mrs. Clara's neat handwriting, addressed to him. "Elliot," it began, "you're not the first to lose something for being who you are. 10 years ago, my son was like you, proud, hardworking, and hiding. This box was his. Read it, and you'll understand." Elliot's breath caught. Mrs. Clara had never mentioned a son. He unfolded the letter further, his hands trembling, and began to read. The letter felt heavy in Elliot's hands, each word pulling him deeper into a story he hadn't expected. Mrs. Clara's son, Daniel, had worked at Harper & Sons in the early 2000s, a carpenter with a knack for intricate woodwork. Like Elliot, he'd been good at his job, too good to be ignored, too quiet to raise suspicion. But Daniel was gay, and when rumors spread about his relationship with a man from a neighboring town, the company found a flimsy excuse to let him go. Insubordination, they'd called it. But Clara knew the truth. Daniel never recovered. He left Willow Creek, cut off contact, and Clara hadn't seen him since. Elliot's throat tightened as he read. The Polaroid showed a younger Clara with a lanky, smiling man in his 20s, his arm around her in one photo, another of him carving a wooden bird. The key, Clara wrote, unlocked a storage unit on the edge of town. What's inside is for you. The letter ended. Use it to fight back. Sam leaned over Elliot's shoulder, reading silently. She's giving you a chance, he said, his voice soft but urgent. Whatever's in that storage unit, it's not just about her son. It's about you, too. Elliot wasn't sure he believed in chances anymore. He'd spent a decade building a life in Willow Creek, only to have it torn down in a day. But the letter stirred something, anger. Yes, but also a spark of purpose. He tucked the key into his pocket and looked at Sam. Tomorrow, he said. We'll go tomorrow. The storage facility was a maze of rusted metal doors under a gray October sky. Unit 17 was at the far end, its padlock stiff with age. Elliot's hands shook as he turned the key, the door groaning as it opened. Inside was a small, dusty space filled with boxes, a workbench, and shelves lined with tools. A carved wooden sign hung on the wall, Daniel's workshop. The air smelled of sawdust and time. Elliot and Sam sifted through the boxes. Most held sketches of furniture designs, receipts, and old work gloves. But one box, marked with a faded rainbow sticker, was different. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by Daniel to his mother, never sent. They detailed his love for a man named Tom, their dreams of leaving Willow Creek, and the crushing fear of being found out. One letter mentioned a ledger, hidden in the workbench, that documented Harper and Sons' shady practice under the table deals, unpaid overtime, and discriminatory firings. Elliot found the ledger under a false panel in the workbench. Its pages were yellowed but meticulous, listing names, dates, and incidents. Daniel had been thorough, noting every time the company skirted labor laws or targeted workers who didn't fit their mold. Elliot's name wasn't there. He'd come later, but the pattern was clear. Harper and Sons had a history of pushing out anyone who didn't conform. This could be it, Sam said, his eyes wide. Proof they've been doing this for years. You could take it to a lawyer. Elliot nodded, but doubt not at him. A ledger from a decade ago might not be enough. And who would believe him? A fired construction worker, over a company that employed half the town. Still, he took the ledger and the letters, locking the unit behind them. Back at the apartment, Elliot spread the documents across the table. Sam made coffee, the familiar ritual grounding them both. What now? Sam asked, sitting beside him. I don't know, Elliot admitted. This feels bigger than me. Bigger than us. The next day, Elliot returned to the library, the ledger tucked under his arm. Mia, the librarian, recognized him and listened as he explained. Her eyes lit up when she saw the ledger. This is gold, she said. There's a lawyer in Harrisburg who takes cases like this pro bono. Sometimes. I'll get you her contact. Elliot felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile. He thanked Mia and drove to Rosie's diner, where Sam was working the lunch shift. The diner was busier now, locals filling the booths, their conversations a low hum. Elliot sat in his usual spot, the ledger hidden in his bag. He watched Sam move between tables, his smile masking the worry Elliot knew he carried. A man in a flannel shirt, one of Elliot's former co-workers, approached the counter. Heard you got canned, he said, his tone casual but edged with malice. Should have kept your personal life private. Man. Elliot's fists clenched, but Sam stepped in, his voice calm but firm. He's just here for coffee. Rick. Let it go. Rick smirked and walked away. But the encounter left Elliot shaken. The town was watching, judging, and he felt exposed. That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. The ledger sat on the nightstand, its weight heavier than the box it came from. He thought of Daniel, a man he'd never met but felt connected to through shared pain. He thought of Clara, who'd carried her son's loss for a decade. And he thought of Sam, who deserved better than a life of hiding. By morning, Elliot made a decision. He'd contact the lawyer. He'd fight not just for himself, but for Daniel, for Clara, for every worker Harper and Sons had wronged. The ledger was a start, but he needed more. He needed to talk to Clara. Elliot found Clara at the diner the next evening, sitting alone in a corner booth with a cup of tea. Her silver hair caught the light, and her hands, lined with age, folded neatly around the mug. He slid into the seat across from her, the ledger tucked inside his jacket. Why me? He asked, his voice low. Why give me the box? Clara's eyes, sharp despite her years, met his. Because you're still here, she said. Daniel wasn't. He gave up after they fired him. I couldn't help him, but I can help you. Elliot swallowed, the weight of her words settling in. The ledger, he said, pulling it out. It's got enough to hurt them, but I don't know if it's enough to win. Clara nodded, her expression unreadable. There's more, she said. Daniel kept recording conversations with the foreman, back when they used tape recorders. They're in the storage unit, hidden in a false bottom of a toolbox. I didn't know until after he left. Elliot's pulse quickened. Recordings could be a game changer. But they were old, possibly degraded. Still, it was a lead. He thanked Clara and promised to keep her updated. As he left, she grabbed his hand. "Don't let them make you feel small," she said. "You're not." Back at the storage unit, Elliot and Sam found the toolbox Clara described. The false bottom was tricky, but after prying it open, they uncovered a small cassette player and 3 tapes, labeled with dates from 2003. Elliot's hands trembled as he held them. These were Daniel's voice, his fight, preserved in plastic and magnetic tape. At home, they borrowed an old cassette player from Sam's coworker. The first tape crackled to life. Daniel's voice steady but tense, arguing with a foreman about unfair hours. The second tape was Warsey conversation where the foreman used slurs, admitting they fired a worker for not fitting in. The third tape mentioned a pattern of targeting troublemakers, including those suspected of being gay. Elliot's stomach churned. This was proof, raw and undeniable. Sam's eyes were wide. "This could destroy them," he said. "But it's dangerous. They won't go down quietly." Elliot knew he was right. Harper & Sons was a pillar of Willow Creek, employing dozens and sponsoring Little League teams. Going after them meant taking on the town itself. But the tapes, combined with the ledger, gave him a chance to say a real one. He contacted the lawyer Mia recommended, Sarah Gwynn, a sharp-witted attorney in her 40s who specialized in workplace discrimination. Over a video call, Elliot explained everything: the firing, the ledger, the tapes. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she listened. "This is strong," she said. "But we need corroboration. Other workers, witnesses, anything to tie it to today." Elliot spent the next few days tracking down former coworkers. Most refused to talk, their doors slamming or phones going silent. But one, a retired welder named Joe, agreed to meet at a coffee shop outside town. Joe was in his 60s, grizzled and wary, but he'd worked with Daniel. "They did him dirty," Joe said, stirring his coffee. "Same as you. I saw how they treated anyone different. Never said nothing, wish I had." Joe's story wasn't enough for court, but it was a start. Elliot felt a spark of momentum, but it came with fear. Rumors were spreading in Willow Creek. At the diner, Sam overheard customers whispering about troublemakers and outsiders. One night, someone slashed the tires on Elliot's truck, leaving a note: "Leave town." Sam wanted to report it, but Elliot hesitated. The police chief was a friend of the Harper family. Instead, they replaced the tires with money they couldn't spare and kept their heads down. But the incident lit a fire in Elliot. He wasn't running. Not this time. He and Sam began organizing the evidence, digitizing the tapes, scanning the ledger, and compiling a timeline. Sarah guided them, warning that the case could take months, even years. "You're not just fighting for you," she said. "You're fighting for everyone they've hurt." Elliot nodded, but the weight of it pressed on him. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who loved his partner and wanted his life back. At night, he and Sam would sit on their couch, the ledger and tapes spread out, and talk about what came next. Sam was optimistic, his faith in justice unshaken. Elliot envied that. One evening, Clara stopped by with a pie, her way of checking in. She looked at the evidence and smiled faintly. "Daniel would have liked you," she said. "He was stubborn, too." Elliot didn't feel stubborn. He felt scared. But as he looked at Sam, laughing over a slice of pie, he knew he couldn't stop. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Daniel, Clara, and every person forced to hide who they were. The days blurred into a grind of preparation. Elliot and Sam spent hours with Sarah, building a case that felt both ironclad and fragile. The ledger and tapes were damning. But Sarah needed more current witnesses. Documents. Anything to prove Harper and Sons hadn't changed in a decade. Elliot felt the pressure mounting. A constant ache in his chest. Willow Creek was closing ranks. And he was running out of allies. He reached out to another former coworker, Maria, who'd left the company a year earlier. She met him at a park, her eyes darting nervously. "I saw things," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "They fired a guy for being too feminine. Never said it outright. But we all knew. I kept quiet because I needed the job." She agreed to write a statement, but refused to testify. "My family's still here," she said. "I can't risk it." Elliot understood, but her fear fueled his own. He and Sam were exposed, their lives under a microscope. At the diner, Sam faced cold stares from regulars who'd once tipped generously. One night, a group of men lingered outside, their laughter sharp and menacing. Sam brushed it off, but Elliot saw the strain in his smile. Sarah suggested going public. A story like this small town injustice, a pattern of discrimination, it could get traction, she said. Media attention might pressure Harper and Sons to settle. Elliot hesitated. Publicity meant outing himself to the world, not just Willow Creek. But Sam was all in. "Let them see us," he said. "We're not the ones who should be ashamed." Elliot agreed, and Sarah connected them with a journalist from a Pittsburgh paper. The reporter, a woman named Lena, met them at Rosie's diner. She was in her 30s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a recorder in hand. Elliot told her everything is firing. Daniel's story, the ledger, the tapes. Lena listened, her pen moving furiously. "This could be big," she said, "but it'll get messy. You ready for that?" Elliot wasn't sure, but he nodded. The article ran a week later. Front page of the Sunday edition, "Fired for Love, a decade of discrimination at Harper and Sons." It detailed Elliot's case, Daniel's history, and the company's pattern of targeting vulnerable workers. The response was immediate. Some locals called it lies. Others whispered support. A few strangers sent letters to the diner, praising Elliot's courage. But the backlash was fierce. Harper and Sons issued a statement denying wrongdoing, claiming Elliot's firing was due to performance issues. The foreman, a burly man named Carl, confronted Elliot outside the hardware store. "You're dragging us through the mud," he spat. "You'll regret this." Elliot stood his ground, but his heart raced. That night, he and Sam found their apartment door spray painted with a slur. Sam scrubbed it clean, his hands shaking with rage. "We're not backing down," he said, but his voice cracked. Elliot pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "We're in this together," he whispered. It was a promise, but it felt like a plea. Sarah filed the lawsuit, naming Elliot as the plaintiff in a discrimination case against Harper and Sons. The ledger and tapes were submitted as evidence, along with Maria's statement and Joe's account. Lena's article had drawn attention, and a few more former workers came forward, their stories echoing Daniel's and Elliot's. The case was gaining traction, but so was the hostility. One evening, Clara called Elliot to her house, a small bungalow filled with photos of Daniel. She handed him a USB drive. "I digitized the tapes," she said, "and I found something else, Daniel's journal. It's not evidence, but it's his heart. Read it when you need strength." Elliot took the journal home, its leather cover worn soft. He read it late into the night, Daniel's words painting a life of quiet defiance. He wrote of Tom, their stolen moments, and the pain of hiding. One entry stuck with Elliot: "I want to be free, not just for me, but for everyone who comes after." The journal gave Elliot resolve. But the town's anger was growing. At the diner, Sam faced a boycott from some regulars. Rosie, the diner's owner, stood by him. But business was suffering. Elliot felt guilt gnawing at him. "This is my fault," he told Sam one night, staring at the ceiling. "I dragged you into this." Sam sat up, his eyes fierce. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. I chose you." He kissed Elliot, a quiet act of rebellion against the world outside. The next morning, Elliot woke to a call from Sarah. "We've got a hearing date," she said. 2 months from now. Be ready, theory coming for you." Elliot hung up, his stomach churning. The fight was real now, and there was no turning back. The weeks before the hearing were a gauntlet. Elliot and Sam lived under a microscope, their every move scrutinized by Willow Creek's tight-knit community. The diner became a battleground of whispers, some supportive, others venomous. Rosie put up a rainbow sticker on the cash register, a quiet show of solidarity. But it only fueled the divide. A local church group organized a protest outside, holding signs about family values. Sam kept working, his smile unwavering. But Elliot saw the toll it took. Sarah coached them relentlessly. "They'll try to discredit you," she warned. "Paint you as unreliable, unstable. Stick to the facts, your work record, the ledger, the tapes." Elliot memorized his decade at Harper & Sons, every project, every promotion, every glowing review. He wasn't just fighting for justice. He was fighting to reclaim his dignity. Lena's article had sparked national interest, and a small LGBTQ advocacy group from Pittsburgh reached out. They offered resources, legal advice, media contacts, even a counselor to help Elliot and Sam cope. The counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Patel, met them at a community center. "You're carrying a lot," she told Elliot. "It's okay to feel scared, but you're not alone." Elliot didn't feel alone when he was with Sam, but the town's hostility was suffocating. One night, someone threw a brick through the diner's window, shattering a pane near Sam's counter. The police called it vandalism, but no one was arrested. Rosie boarded up the window, her face grim. "This town's showing its true colors," she said. Elliot turned to Daniel's journal for strength. One passage haunted him. "They want us to disappear, but silence is their weapon. Speak, even if your voice shakes." Elliot wasn't a speaker, was a builder, used to letting his work talk for him. But now, he had to find his voice. He and Sam started attending support group meetings in Harrisburg, a 40-minute drive. The group was small, a mix of young and old, all with stories of loss and resilience. A trans woman named Alex shared how she'd been fired from a retail job for her identity. A non-binary teen, Riley, talked about bullying at school. Their stories wove a thread of shared struggle, and Elliot found himself speaking up, his voice steadier each time. Back in Willow Creek, Clara became their anchor. She brought casseroles, shared stories of Daniel, and quietly rallied support. A few locals, mostly older women who'd known Clara for years, started coming to the diner again, tipping Sam generously. "Not everyone hates you," Clara said one evening. "They're just scared of change." The hearing loomed, and Sarah uncovered more evidence. Payroll records showing Harper & Sons had underpaid workers for years, often targeting minorities. Combined with the ledger and tapes, it painted a damning picture. But the company's lawyers were ruthless, digging into Elliot's past for anything to discredit him. They found nothing. Elliot had lived too carefully, but the scrutiny left him raw. One night, Sam found Elliot staring at the wooden box. "It's lid open." "You okay?" Sam asked, sitting beside him. "I keep thinking about Daniel," Elliot said. "He didn't get a chance to fight. What if we lose? Sam took his hand, his grip firm. Then we keep fighting. For him. For us. The morning of the hearing. Elliot woke before dawn. He and Sam drove to the Harrisburg courthouse, a gray stone building that felt impossibly large. Sarah met them outside, her suit crisp and her eyes sharp. "You've got this," she said. "Tell the truth. That's enough." The courtroom was packed locals, reporters, even a few faces from the support group. Elliot's heart pounded as he took the stand, his work boots scuffing the polished floor. He told his story, 10 years of loyalty, a sudden firing, the whispers about his relationship with Sam. He spoke of the ledger, the tapes, Daniel's story. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. The company's lawyer was brutal, questioning Elliot's work ethic, his lifestyle. But Sarah was relentless, presenting the ledger, playing the tapes, and calling witnesses like Joe and Maria. The room was silent as Daniel's voice filled the air, his words from 2003 echoing Elliot's pain. As the day ended, the judge adjourned for deliberation. Elliot felt drained but lighter, like he'd shed a weight he'd carried for years. Sam squeezed his hand outside the courthouse. "You were incredible," he said. Elliot managed a smile. "We're not done yet." The wait for the judge's ruling was agonizing. Days stretched into weeks, each one heavier with anticipation. Elliot and Sam tried to keep life normal. Sam at the diner, Elliot picking up odd jobs, but the town's tension was palpable. Supporters left notes at the diner, small gestures of kindness, but the hostility lingered. A local radio host called Elliot a troublemaker, and the company's lawyers leaked stories painting him as a disgruntled employee. Elliot clung to Daniel's journal, reading it nightly. One entry stood out: "Love is worth fighting for, even when it hurts." It reminded him of Sam, who faced every glare and whisper with quiet strength. Elliot wanted to be that strong, but doubt crept in. What if the judge sided with Harper and Sons? What if all this exposing their lives, risking everything, was for nothing? Sarah kept them grounded, updating them on legal maneuvers. The advocacy group organized a rally outside the courthouse, drawing a small crowd with signs reading, "Love is not a crime." Elliot and Sam attended, standing hand in hand for the first time in public. A few locals jeered, but others clapped, and Alex from the support group hugged them both. "You're changing things," she said. Elliot wasn't sure, but the warmth of the crowd felt like a shield. Clara joined them at the rally, her presence a quiet force. She'd started speaking out, telling Daniel's story to anyone who'd listen. "I lost my son to this town's hate," she told a reporter. "I won't lose Elliot, too." Her words, printed in a follow-up article by Lena, sparked more support. A crowdfunding campaign raised money for legal fees, and strangers sent letters of encouragement. But the backlash grew darker. One night, Elliot's truck was vandalized again, its windows smashed. The police took a report, but their indifference was clear. Sam wanted to move, to start over somewhere safer. But Elliot refused. "This is our home," he said. "I'm not letting them win." Sarah called with news. The judge wanted a second hearing to review new evidence. Harper and Sons had submitted affidavits from current employees, claiming Elliot was disruptive. But Sarah had a surprise. Another former worker, a man named Greg, had come forward. He'd been fired in 2015 under similar circumstances and had kept emails from the foreman hinting at bias. "This strengthens our case," Sarah said. "But they're fighting dirty." The second hearing was grueling. Elliot sat through hours of testimony, his hands clenched. Greg took the stand, his voice steady as he described his firing after being seen with his boyfriend. The emails, read aloud, were chilling veiled threats. coded language about fitting in. Sarah tied them to the ledger and tapes, showing a decades-long pattern. The company's lawyers attacked, accusing Greg of lying and Elliot of orchestrating a smear campaign. But Sarah was relentless, her questions sharp and precise. When Clara testified, her voice broke as she spoke of Daniel, her grief filling the room. "They took my son's livelihood," she said. "They took his pride. Don't let them take Elliot's." Elliot watched the judge, a stern older man, his face unreadable. As the hearing ended, he felt a strange calm. He'd done everything he could. Outside, Sam pulled him into a hug, ignoring the stares. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. Back in Willow Creek, the diner became a refuge. Rosie hired extra security, and the rainbow sticker stayed on the register. A few locals started coming back, some out of guilt, others out of respect. One, an older man named Frank, approached Elliot. "I worked with Daniel," he said. "I should have spoken up back then. I'm sorry." Elliot nodded, his throat tight. "You're here now?" he said. Frank's apology wasn't absolution, but it was a start. The ruling came on a cold November morning. Sarah called Elliot and Sam to her office. "We won," she said, her voice steady but triumphant. The judge had ruled in Elliot's favor, citing clear evidence of discrimination. Harper & Sons was ordered to pay damages a significant sum and issue a public apology. The ledger and tapes were deemed admissible, setting a precedent for future cases. Elliot felt numb, then elated. He hugged Sam, tears stinging his eyes. "It's over," he said. "Not yet," Sarah replied. "This is just the beginning." The victory was bittersweet. The judge's ruling sent ripples through Willow Creek, but it didn't erase the scars. Harper & Sons issued a stiff apology, published in the local paper, but the company's owners stayed silent, their influence still looming. Elliot's damages enough to cover legal fees, and a few months' rent felt like a small price for a decade of his life. Still, the win was more than money. It was validation, a public acknowledgement that what happened to him was wrong. Elliot and Sam celebrated quietly at the diner, sharing a milkshake like they had years ago, before everything unraveled. Rosie comped their meal, her eyes misty. "You boys did something big," she said. Clara joined them, bringing a photo of Daniel to place on the table. "He'd be proud," she said, her voice soft but steady. But the town was divided. Some locals embraced the change, stopping by to shake Elliot's hand or leave tips for Sam. Others doubled down, boycotting the diner and spreading rumors online. A local blog called the ruling a witch hunt, and Elliot's name was dragged through comment sections. He tried to ignore it, but each word stung. Sarah pushed for more. "This case could set a precedent," she told Elliot. "We can sue for systemic changes, better protections, mandatory training. It's not just about you anymore." Elliot agreed, but the fight felt endless. He was tired, worn down by months of scrutiny and fear. He found solace in Daniel's journal, its pages now dog-eared. One entry read, "I dream of a place where love doesn't cost everything." Elliot wanted that place, not just for himself, but for Sam, for Clara, for everyone still hiding. He and Sam started planning a future beyond Willow Creek. Maybe a city where they could hold hands without looking over their shoulders. The advocacy group offered to fund a speaking tour, sharing Elliot's story across Pennsylvania. He hesitated, unsure he was ready to be a figurehead. But Sam was adamant. "You've already started this," he said. "People need to hear you." Elliot agreed, and they began preparing, working with the group to craft a message of resilience and hope. One evening, Clara invited them to her house. She'd found more of Daniel's belongings: a sketchbook, a carved bird, a letter he'd meant to send Tom. He wanted to fight, she said, handing Elliot the letter. He just didn't know how. The letter was a love note, raw and honest, promising a life together despite the odds. Elliot read it, his heart aching for a man he'd never meet. The speaking tour began in Harrisburg, a small event at a community center. Elliot stood before a crowd of 50, his voice shaky at first. He told his story, Daniel's story, and the story of a town that needed to change. Sam stood in the back, his smile steadying Elliot. The crowd applauded, some in tears, and a young man approached afterward. "I'm gay," he whispered. "Your story gives me hope." Those words carried Elliot through the next stops: Lancaster, York, smaller towns where the crowds grew. Some heckled, but most listened. The tour wasn't just about speaking. It was about listening to others' stories, their pain, their triumphs. Elliot realized he wasn't alone, and neither was Sam. Back in Willow Creek, the diner saw a slow return of customers. Rosie hired a new cook, and Sam trained them, his optimism infectious. But the harassment didn't stop. One night, a group of teenagers threw eggs at their apartment windows. Elliot cleaned it up, his hands steady but his heart heavy. "Maybe we should leave," he told Sam. Sam shook his head. "Not until we're ready. This is our fight, too." The advocacy group connected them with a national organization, which offered to fund a move if they wanted it. Elliot and Sam considered it, dreaming of a fresh start. But Willow Creek was home, flawed as it was. They decided to stay, at least for now, to see the fight through. As winter settled in, Elliot visited the storage unit one last time. He left a note in Daniel's toolbox: "We're fighting for you." It felt right, a promise kept across years. Winter blanketed Willow Creek, softening the town's edges but not its divisions. Elliot and Sam pressed on, their lives a mix of quiet victories and lingering battles. The lawsuit's success had forced Harper and Sons to implement anti-discrimination training. But change was slow. Some employees quit, unwilling to adapt. Others stayed, grudgingly compliant. Elliot didn't return to the company he couldn't, but he found work with a smaller contractor in Harrisburg, one that valued his skills and didn't ask questions about his personal life. The speaking tour grew, taking Elliot and Sam across the Northeast. They spoke at colleges, community centers, even a small pride event in Philadelphia. Each talk chipped away at Elliot's fear, replacing it with purpose. He wasn't just telling his story. He was amplifying Daniel's, Clara's, and countless others. Sam stood by him, his presence a steady anchor. At one event, a teenager gave them a rainbow bracelet, saying, "You make me feel like I can be myself." Elliot kept it in his pocket, a talisman of hope. Clara became a regular at their apartment, bringing stories and strength. She'd started a small support group at her church, a quiet rebellion against its conservative roots. "It's not much," she told Elliot, "but it's a start." He admired her courage, seeing echoes of Daniel in her resolve. She gave him the wooden box to keep, saying, "It's yours now. Fill it with your own story." Elliot and Sam did just that. They added mementos: a ticket stub from their first date, a photo from the rally, a copy of Lena's article. The box became a symbol of their fight, a reminder that love could endure even the worst storms. They placed it on their mantle, next to a picture of Daniel Clara had given them. The town began to shift. Slowly, Rosie's Diner became a haven for those who supported Elliot and Sam. Its booths filled with new faces: young people, allies, even a few former Harper and Sons workers. Frank, the man who'd apologized, started a petition for a non-discrimination ordinance in Willow Creek. It was a long shot, But signatures grew, one name at a time. One spring evening, Elliot and Sam sat on their balcony, watching the sunset over the town's rooftops. The air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs. "Do you think we did enough?" Elliot asked, his voice soft. Sam took his hand, their fingers intertwining. "We did more than enough," he said. "We showed them we're not invisible." Elliot nodded, his eyes on the horizon. The fight wasn't over. There would always be more battles, more towns like Willow Creek. But they'd carved out a space for themselves, a life built on love and defiance. Daniel's journal, now tucked in the box, had one final entry that Elliot read often. "The world changes when you refuse to hide." They didn't hide anymore. At the diner, they shared a booth openly, their laughter drawing smiles from Rosie and Clara. At Pride events, they held hands, unafraid. And in their apartment, they dreamed of a future where no one had to fight to be seen. The wooden box sat on the mantel, its lid closed but its story alive. It had started with Daniel's pain, carried by Clara's love, and ended with Elliot and Sam's triumph. It wasn't just a box, it was a legacy, a reminder that truth could outlast hate. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elliot leaned against Sam, their shoulders touching. "We made it," he whispered. Sam smiled, his eyes bright. "Yeah, we did." And in that moment, Willow Creek felt a little less heavy, a little more like home.